So when I was a young man, I read a lot of books on economy, The Economist, philosophy. Ayn Rand had a big impact on me. I worked my way back through different philosophers, particularly along the Aristotelian line of philosophers. And of course, my father developed the Neotech discovery, the Neotech idea system. The thing that really grabbed me in Neotech was the whole concept of mysticism and his definition of mysticism. It was different than anything I'd seen before. Ayn Rand does touch on mysticism, but not to the degree and the extent that my father, Dr. Wallace, exposed and identified in Neotech. Now, the mysticism part is something I think I could break a little news today for you. So mysticism in Neotech is fully integrated honesty and building a life on honesty and effort as opposed to dishonesty and laziness. When I was entering young adulthood, young manhood, I felt that Neotech was so important that it pulled me back to my father. I remember the phone call expressing to him that Neotech needs to be more common than the Bible. It needs to be, in fact, for a while there, when I took over the marketing and dissemination of Neotech, I literally called the Neotech discovery the Neotech Bible for a period of time. And I had this sense that when someone said Neotech, that it had to be as commonplace as, say, the light bulb. A light bulb, Neotech, one and the same, just that common. I was a young man, big visions and dreams. I would tell the people whom I hired that our goal was to be larger than IBM in 10 years. IBM was the company back in those days. And of course, and I've told you this before, that's before I really understood how deep mysticism goes. And here's what I began realizing, that mysticism, and let's just call it an obvious and loud way, is quite obvious. And I believe that's where most of even my readers focus on that. But that's not really the great harm caused by mysticism. You see, the loud and obvious mysticism is loud and obvious. And it's quite easy to tackle. But what is not so easy is the subtle mysticism. And the more subtle you go, the more damaging that is to our lives. And Frankie, that could be something, by the way, we could put up as a TikTok video. That's the mind shift. It's not the obvious. That's where everyone focuses, the obvious, the evil of the government, the evil of this. But it's the subtle, the very subtle that creates the damage. And I began realizing this as a young man. And as I began understanding something called Neothink. Neothink, as you all obviously know, is a different mentality than most people experience. In fact, that's why it got the name Neothink, New Think. Now, Neothink is not a new mentality per se, but it is for 99 point something% of the human race. You see, all throughout, going back to the early conscious beings, Aristotle. Aristotle was an incredible neo-thinker. But most of the Greeks and most people through modern day are not neo-thinkers. It is a new mentality, a new think for 99 point something percentage of the population. So that's why I've stuck to that name, Neothink. And what I really did in my works is bring to people whom I've helped the Neothink mentality. If you want to encapsulate everything I've done, that's it. It's showing people from the mysticism-plagued mentality, I'm going to get into that a little bit here, taking them out of that and lifting them to the Neothink mentality. Now, the mysticism-plagued mentality, what is that? Well, that is, again, simplify, 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 which I've done in my works. The mysticism-plagued mentality is simply the following mode. Now, there's so much more to the following mode than what meets the eye initially. The following mode. Now, we have been followers. It's almost hardwired. It's not really hardwired, but it's almost hardwired into our brains. When I began reading more and more, expanding my knowledge, and I came upon Julian Jaynes, Dr. Julian Jaynes, Princeton University, wrote some world-changing books, and particularly the breakdown of the origin of consciousness and the breakdown of the bicameral mind. In there, you see how the bicameral man was a follower. There was no introspection, no subjective thinking, no inner mind space whatsoever. He was an automatic reacting animal, by far the most advanced and most intelligent animal. Our brain was larger by magnitudes of any other animal. But we were followers. And what did we follow? Well, we followed, let's go back 5,000 years to the pharaohs. We followed the pharaohs. They were the man gods, the man who can communicate with the gods. And whatever the man god said, which is really just his right brain directing his natural survival mechanism, and then passing that on, leading the society. But we were followers. Now, what really struck me as I became a young man, studied neotech, studied objectivism, studied The Economist, studied Murray Rothbard and libertarianism and classical liberalism, what really struck me was that we are still in the almost identical societal structure that we were 5,000 years ago. So I began asking myself, well, why is that? We are no longer animals of nature. We are now conscious beings, which is a leap beyond nature. And those of you, and I know most of you have read Julian Jaynes' book because I've recommended it so often, you realize that we are no longer animals of nature. Our conscious minds have made a leap beyond nature. And we're the only animal that is no longer controlled by nature. So I asked myself, why are we in the same societal state that we were back with the pharaohs and the man gods and the structure of the ruling class and the followers? What puts us there? Why aren't we all the potential of our minds, going back to the child of the past, the possibilities, why don't we experience that? And that's when I began realizing it's subtle mysticism. It's not the obvious mysticism that we can sit around and attack and pull up and have these wonderful, discussions about, which is valuable. And that, don't get me wrong, it's very valuable because we need to understand mysticism. But what really holds us down as the human race, as mankind, is that subtle mysticism. And that's the news I'm breaking to you today. Subtle mysticism. And this is what I got my eye on 45 years ago. It was this subtle mysticism. In Neotech, the blatant mysticism, the loud, hard, evil mysticism is all pointed out to us. But then taking it down to that other level that is the real destruction of mankind, it's that subtle mysticism, and it manifests itself as the following mode. Now, back in the day, when I say back in the day, I'm referring to when I got started as a young man and I began working. I didn't end up in the business realm. And by the way, now that I'm going public, it's going to become known. You're going to start seeing my accolades, my credentials, so to speak, my accomplishments. I've never talked about them. I'm a very humble person. I've never talked about my accolade. When you find out what they are, it will surprise a lot of you. I am in the top 5 authors in history as far as the proceeds going to the author. And why? Because I did it all myself. No, I was never in a following mode. I didn't rely on big publishers, and I had access to big publishers. My father was published by Warner Brothers, which was the biggest publisher at that time, and he was published by Crown Publishing for hard copy, which one of the largest at the time, hard copy, expensive books and trade books. So I had access to the major publishers. But at a fairly young age, I began carving a path and realizing that we could do this ourselves. So and I'm just throwing this out because now we're going public, and you've never heard this before, and never from me. I think Wallace is starting to put some of this up online now, but it's preparing now to go public in a big way. So you need the credentials. You need Joe Rogan, for example, to say, wait, I've never heard of this guy, but he's in the top 5 authors of all time, all of history, as far as proceeds to the author. Now, how do I not know? I need to give him a call. You see what I'm saying? I'm saying this now. Please, I'm not bragging, and I don't brag. I've never bragged. I've always been a humble person. But just so you can understand, by breaking out of the subtle following mode, what I've done, and what I am bringing to the world. So when I began my journey, I said to my father, I said, we can do this ourselves. We don't need Warner Publishing. We don't need Crown Publishing. We can do this ourselves. And that gave us a lot more freedom. And to give you a little insight to that, my father's poker book, which is the roots behind Neotech, believe it or not, and I think most of you understand that, about the psychology of poker and how the world is run through high-stakes poker games. Look at our tariffs bargaining and our military dynamics, high-stakes AI dynamics, high-stakes biotech, something I'll talk about a little bit. Biotech, our challenges now with China. High-stakes poker games we're playing. And I'm going to use these high-stake techniques for immortality, which I'll get to in a moment. Just to give you a little insight on that. When I sit down with President Trump, I'm not going to necessarily talk about the prime law. I'm going to develop a path to the prime law. And I'm not necessarily going to talk about ending the suffering, which is by far the most important point on my mind. Remember the pivot I talked about after Mount Pelerin into our true essence of curing age-related diseases, and my tagline is end the suffering, and what that causes to families, and how we're going to get tremendous bipartisan when I take this to a legislative act. The bipartisan dynamics. I've written about this in my daily primes, so I won't spend more time on that right now. But when I sit down with Trump, the most important thing I'm going to focus on is how we cannot afford to lose this race against China, the biotech race, for national security reasons. We lost the semiconductor race because we were asleep at the wheel. We cannot be asleep at the wheel. This is a national security threat. The biotech industry, for the first time in 2024, China surpassed us in clinical trials. And why is that? It's because of big bureaucracy in America. So I'm going to talk about lowering the regulatory state. And of course, taxation is making it easier for these biomedical and biotech companies to soar ahead and product development and research and development. But you see how it's all a poker game, my friends. It's all a high-stakes poker game, and I'm playing the game. My approach in Eastern Europe is completely different, and my approach with President Milei will be completely different. Different set of cards for each situation. Now, back to the subtle mysticism. So I began to realize that the following mode is the subtle mysticism we don't realize we have, and that there is a mentality that we were meant to live. Essentially and eventually that mentality leads to value creation, right? That's our essence. We are value creators. We are the only living entity that can create values from scratch. That is our essence. That's what we were meant to be, value creators. As followers, we can be value producers. But what does that lead to? I've used this example before. A friend of mine flies airplanes, commercial jets. Glamorous job, he talks about in this country and that country, flies all over the world. His father was a pilot for TWA, flew all over the world for 40, 50 years. But what happens? It's glamorous. You meet people. It's exciting. But what happens after 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? You know what happens? When they land in another country, and they've been there now dozens of times, what do? I'll tell you what they do. They check in, they go down to the bar, and they drink. And so many of these people, these pilots in these glamorous jobs, are alcoholics because the stagnation sets in, and it's subtle mysticism that got them there. Subtle mysticism. We're all value producers. Oh, most of us are value producers. You do have some parasites, but most of civilization are value producers. But I use the example of the McDonald's cook, flipping hamburgers, serving up, it's a value. And I don't like to throw shade on anyone who's a productive human being. I don't mean it from that standpoint. What I mean is that there's another mentality. So there's a difference between Richard Branson and the cook at McDonald's and their experience of happiness. And I like to use Richard Branson. Number one, and this is not why I do it, but I have been mistaken many times in public as Richard Branson. For some reason or another, people have come up to me and have thought that I was Richard Branson. I have to say no. And that's before Mark Hamilton became a public name. But Richard Branson, if you just look at that man, he's happy. He lives an amazing life. He's an incredible value creator, but he also understands family and love and that part of his life. So I use him as an example a lot. Steve Jobs I like to use a lot too. Now, a lot of people, because he's hot and heavy in the media right now, don't have their problems with Elon Musk, but he is an incredible value creator, so credit where credit is due. Go throughout history, Henry Ford, Juan Tripp, some of the Harvey Firestone. When you get to know their lives, and I've read books on these people, they're just very happy people, and it's because they are value creators. They're living the life they were meant to live. Now, they're the greats, but this can happen at any level. But I had to get people from this stagnant routine rut, these staid responsibilities, into this neo-think mentality. So how could I do that? Well, I realized that the following mode was basically specialized thinking. They're being blocked off from integrated thinking. And what do I mean by that, being blocked off? Well, Some of it's from sort of this hardwired dynamic to follow based on our bicameral roots. Some of it's that. We're born, we mimic our parents and our older siblings, and we begin to mimic the world around us. That's following. Then we go into school, and we have to obey the teacher, obviously, and authority, and that's following. Then we might go to church or Sunday school, same thing, following the authority. Then if we go into the military, follow the authority. Then we enter the real world, we'll call it, get a job, follow what upper management tells you to do. Then we get involved in politics, or at least do our civic duty and figure out who we're going to vote for. We're following what the politicians lay on us. Then we are bombarded with the influential class, I call it. That's the media, the legacy media. We follow, our minds filled with illusion, pollution, I call it. In business, we're discouraged from rising up by the white-collar hoax. Those of you who have read my works about the white-collar hoax. So society is conditioned, it's set to keep us in the following mode. And I know I've mentioned to you in past talks that I consider our ruling class the largest cult in history. Because what does a cult do? A cult controls and manipulates our lives and our minds to benefit themselves. So you have these folks going into politics who maybe can't even afford rent in Washington, D.C., but a few years later, they're worth $10, $15, $20 million. A few decades later, they're worth $200 million. So is that not the definition of a cult? Our ruling class. They're controlling our lives. They're manipulating our minds with their cheerleaders, the media, to control us, to suppress us, along with the white-collar hoax, a lot of the big business, holding us down. And my works support everything I'm saying here. So if we had 6 or 7 hours, maybe on a Joe Rogan, I have 3 hours, I can go down and pull up some of this evidence that demonstrates that our ruling class is a cult suppressing us. So how do I go back as a young man, as I began learning and realizing all this? Now, how do I go down to my neighbors, my friends, the parents of my children's schoolmates? How do I begin to help them? Well, that's what turned me into a business author. And again, throwing out my accolades, I am the #1 business author of all time by the measurement of the proceeds going to the author. And why is that? Because I did it all myself. I didn't use a big publisher. I didn't use a team. And it was all my books. And this is my books, excluding my father's books. So it's all the numbers are there. So I did this all myself. And this is how I became a business author. Because I began to realize that the way to remove subtle mysticism, their specialized traps, is through helping them in their day-to-day jobs. And so I'll just briefly mention a few things that you have all read. That's beginning to realize how businesses are laid out to favor the white-collar hoax through this delegation of specialized tasks, through this division of labor, which I've talked to you about, never was meant for business, where you have to pull the mind and the body. You have to pull those together, the mind and the body. You can't separate those for business. You can for manufacturing. Yes. And that's why you have the assembly lines. But you can't do that when it's business, because business demands, requires, survives on the mind integrating with the body of the business. But most big businesses, and this is a white-collar hoax job, are 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 broken down erroneously by the division of labor, and they delegate down these specialized tasks. So the body is sitting way down here, and they're sitting way up here, just enjoying the high leverage. And by the way, their companies would fail, but they get to ride off the past, the original integrators, the original neo-thinkers. They get to ride off of that through mechanical expansion. And again, my books lay this all out. So how do I help the ordinary person break out of subtle mysticism, which is holding back the entire human race? It's through business, through these techniques and tools I began developing. See, when I developed the many-day power thinking team, and when I developed the areas of purpose in the many companies, when I developed the whole company without a company, I wasn't approaching it from a business standpoint, like how can I help, like you see all over the internet ads now on Instagram or what have you, come with me and I'll tenfold your leads, or I'll do this with your income. Or that's not how I approached it. That's why NeoThink is so different than anything else out there. That's not how I approached it. I approached it like this. How do I break people out of the following mode into the integrated thinking mode, ultimately into this new mentality of puzzle building, pulling together by integrating puzzle pieces into these puzzle pictures and these super puzzles? How do I do that? And it wasn't sitting around having mysticism bashing sessions. That was the starting point. That was Neotech. But I had to do NeoThink. And the way to do that was to give them techniques that maybe very innocently, without them knowing what I was doing, began breaking them out of these specialization traps and began introducing their minds to integrated thinking. And you can see that in my business books. And there's a reason that I'm the most successful business author of all time. And it's because my books are not just going in and hitting pain points. They're transforming individuals from a mysticism-plagued ancient mentality into the person they were meant to be, the NeoThink mentality. And what that does ultimately is, what I'm really doing is I am bringing happiness to individuals. Happiness. Because you experience happiness when you become a value creator, because you are on your essence as a human being. And let me take that one step further. When you experience true, deep, abiding happiness, then what happens? That's what my aim and purpose is from here on out. It's curing aging and all age-related diseases, ending the suffering, and, yes, curing death itself. See, without happiness, you cannot live eternally. You just can't. Because stagnation swells and it overtakes. Now, I want everyone here to realize that when I talk, anything I talk or write about, I'm talking from the perspective of the sea of you. That's where I'm coming from. So please do not be intimidated by things I say. And what I mean by that is, a lot of people, when they read, for example, my writings about relationships, and largely women, they feel an intimidation there. I fully understand that because I'm writing from the sea of you. My works, particularly Super Puzzle, is coming from the sea of you. It's not coming from the civilization that we live in right now, what I call the anti-civilization, what my father termed the anti-civilization. And that's what we live in now. So when I talk about certain things, relationships or other things, for example, what we're talking about right now, stagnation. Look, I don't want anyone here feeling guilty or intimidated if they say, well, Mark, I'm stuck. I completely understand that. And you are here because you're a searcher and you're looking for a better way. That's how I found you. Another accolade, I have sent out more first-class letters than any human being in history. About 500 million. Hundreds of millions of first-class letters. And that was my quest to, throughout the world, throughout over 140 countries, to locate the searchers. And if you are here, I'm telling you, regardless of how you may feel right now, you are a searcher. That's why you're here. That's what my lifelong quest was, to find the searchers of the world. And I feel that the 2 million original people in the Neothink Society, in my private club, are, for the most part, the searchers of the world. Now, I have moved on recently from that lifelong quest. Now I'm going to make it happen through Immortalis. It's been a long, long journey. And I made my first attempt at this with the 12 Visions Party over a decade ago. I guess we're about a dozen years ago now. And a number of you were very involved in the 12 Visions Party, and I felt that was an incredibly valuable venture. But I also came to realize that the anti-civilization was it would take too long, that route, to accomplish what we needed to. See, I want to accomplish this in your lifetime. I'm devastated every time I lose one of my readers. So this is the path I realize we need to take now with Immortalis. The progress has happened faster, more aggressively than I could have ever imagined. I'm going to just give you a very brief overview because questions have been asking me this, and then I'm going to open this up to the questions, Q&A. There are 3 locations that you're aware of now in the world. I had a meeting 2 days ago with my friend who has reaches high into the Trump administration. And look, I don't like giving dates because it puts too much pressure on the situation. But just because I'm so excited by this, I'm going to mention this, but please, the odds are, I have to say, they're highly against us. But my friend who is uber careful, an uber individual on doing things right, has said that she feels there is a possibility, a chance, that we could have an executive order signed by Independence Day. Now, people I'm working with, they continually want me to manage expectations, because when you're working with bureaucracies, things don't happen that fast. So please, it's just something that got me very excited, a comment that was made, but that doesn't mean, and we are not, look, I'm going to go full out for this, but that doesn't mean we're going to get that. But I'm just pointing that out to let you know how far we've come so quickly to even think that, this friend of mine is connected to the highest levels in the U.S. government. And when she makes a comment like that, I'm inside doing backflips, although I keep my calm demeanor during the phone call. I'm doing backflips. Europe, Eastern Europe. It's a unique, very unique situation. I know in the past I've mentioned the name. I'm holding back on that now because I don't want other people, competitors will call them, although I don't feel that way about them. But it's a very sensitive situation, very unique, and I want to keep it that way. The highest levels of government are now studying my LOI, my letter of intent, and I'm hearing from the mayor and from my Austrian school friend who's in that government. He's my inside channel. I'm hearing extremely good things, and I'll leave it at that. So much so that one of our readers is going to be in that area in June, and if things move as I'm hoping they will, I'll be asking him, and he has offered to go there and start taking pictures of the potential land that could become Immortalis. Immortalis Europe, we'll call it. Then we have Immortalis America, and then there's Argentina. I sent a heart and soul message through my friend Jose Luis Cordero, to President Milei. I didn't even know if Milei would even have time to see it or respond. Within a few minutes, Milei responded. So I believe I hooked his heart and soul. And that will mean tremendous possibilities for Immortalis Argentina. So that's where we stand. 3 locations in the world, Immortalis. I've covered sort of the story of how I started as a young man, how I used Neotech in my works, how I evolved Neotech and what mysticism really, the real damage caused by mysticism, how I went to work to address that, how I became a business author. Because my original thought was, well, let me put it this way. First of all, I never thought I'd become a writer, number one. Number two, I was extremely involved in editing my father's works. He had made the comment that of his New York editors, the Warner Publishing, the Crown Publishing, that none of those editors came close to what, at such a young age, I was doing for him in editing Neotech. So I believed I would always be basically his editor. But when I began seeing what was really holding back society, and I discussed this with my father, well, that's when we both began to realize I needed to tackle that. And that's how I started. And that's why I became a business author. But then again, look at probably my most known piece of writing to date, and that's Super Puzzle. Originally, I called it the Miss Annabelle story. And why is that so popular? It's because that's my philosopher coming through. That's who I originally was designed to be. And what I did with Super Puzzle and what my father said was, that's the first publication written from the Sea of You. And you see what happened there was I had spent, I started that in Thanksgiving Day, 1997. So much of my business works were completed by the time I started. And by the way, when I say business works, you all realize now it's well beyond business works. Those were exercises to break people into the Neothink mentality. My business books are bringing the Neothink mentality, the leap of mankind, into the final evolution of man. From originally bicameral man, we leapt into consciousness, what I call mysticism plagued consciousness. Then I took us through the leap from Mississippi Plague consciousness into the neo-think mentality, the way our minds were meant to be. And that's what my business books were doing. I'm bringing the neo-think mentality, so it's so much beyond business itself. It's bringing the person you were meant to be to my readers. And the business were simply the tools and techniques to get there. So now you know why my business books outshine any other business books on the market. It's because it's beyond business. It's much deeper than business. It's bringing you to that it's bringing happiness, the life you were meant to live, to my readers. So that's where we went. And then I got to the point where, since I was a young man, I felt the value of human life, particularly when I cultivated and wrote and developed the neo-think mentality and brought that to my readers, to my private club, the Neo-Think Society. And I realized these people now, with this happiness, they have superseded stagnation. They are beginning to understand what an immortal is, what life can be, immortal life, because the static from staid responsibilities begins now. It may not fully leave your life because we're still in an anti-civilization. That's what I meant earlier. Doesn't mean you're right there right now, but you can, at least from my writings, you can see where we can be. That's why you're here. You know where we can be. You know where we should be. And you know there's something holding us back. And that's my anger underneath it all. And I channel that passion into what I'm doing, why I'm tireless, why I invest all of myself, to any extent, even to the last dime I have, I invest myself in achieving this goal, Immortalis, which is going to be our path. And in coordination with curing age-related diseases is going to be one of my questions here that I flagged out is it's going to be this natural evolution of individuals into the neo-think mentality. A question I had was, well, how in Immortalis will I, experience that life you talk about? Well, let me just say this. Prior to the neo-think mentality, actually, let's go back to Jesus Christ, the historical Jesus that I write about in the three visions. Most peasants by the countryside, around the countryside, his ministry would travel around the countryside and talk to these peasants. They were bicameral. Jesus, I believe, in the research I've done, was bicameral himself up to a certain point. Then he made that incredible leap into consciousness. And that's what he was teaching. That was what his ministry, and when I dive into his parables and metaphors and analog models, I see what he was doing. It was the only way to begin allowing these bicameral peasants to begin to make a leap into and toward human consciousness. And from my three visions, I show you how the Bible is a chronological expose or chronological works on the mind evolving from the bicameral mind into the conscious mind. I lay that out in the three visions. So today, with our people, you're not necessarily at that point, but going back to the bicameral, it took so much to make a leap from the bicameral mind into consciousness. In fact, the human race almost went extinct at that period in time. There's chaos and war, and the human race almost destroyed itself. But fast forward to modern times, And babies born just naturally become conscious because it's the world around them. They just naturally become conscious. It's not the huge struggle and the near extinction of the human race. They just become conscious. That's going to happen as immortalis takes hold and things begin moving. No, we're not going to immediately have a prime law society, particularly not in America. But I have it all laid out. It's a poker game. That's our roots. And I know how to do this. We start with national threat. We need to lower these regulations and taxations to free these biotech, biomedical companies to advance more rapidly. And then, and this is the secret, my friends, I'm going to tell you right now. The secret is, once the people begin to love you, there's no stopping you. And that's my path toward, eventually, prime law America. As the people begin to fall in love with what we're doing, who we are, why things are changing, the lives we're saving, the suffering we're ending, and as more and more people begin to see this, they're going to begin looking at, well, what is this prime law Mark Hamilton always talks about? And they're going to see with what just a little bit toward the prime law with reducing regulations and taxation. It's that little bit. What that did, as people begin to love us, there's going to be no stopping us. We have 3 locations on planet Earth that I'm working on, and we'll take each one as they come. Frankie, who works with me on my social media, is right now working on scripts such as what happens if we remove the government tomorrow. Some pretty fascinating mind shifts. That's the key on social media. You want to create these mind shifts. So some very interesting things. I just want to throw that out there. You might want to keep an eye on my social media, TikTok and Instagram particularly, over the next few weeks as we work our way. We're going to get less views. We know that. We understand that. But the caliber of people we begin bringing in is going to be much more powerful. All right. I think I will... I've sort of laid out in a bit, not totally, but laid out sort of my signature speech here. So we all understand where I started, where I came from, how I grew, my roots to where we are today, what I'm doing going forward, and why that's going to consume me at this point. Thank God I have my children to work the business and keep things going as much as possible there. I'm pouring most of my money into Immortalis. It's a very expensive venture. But, you know, it's now or never. It's all or nothing for me. That's where I'm at. So I'm going to... okay. So I'm going to just pull up a handful, and then I'll open it up to you, to all of you. These are questions I feel were definitely worth visiting from over the past few months that came in through the NeoThink.io site, and also a couple from the Ascension site to my daily primes. Wow, I'm just, so I'm looking back through here. I don't know if you guys recognize her. Of course, you recognize Jose, right? Oh, wait, up here, right? Oh, no, here. Okay, you recognize Jose Cordero, and that's Liz Parrish. And she signed an LOI for Immortalis. She wants to bring her BioViva into Immortalis as soon as we open our zone. She's a Mount Rushmore in the longevity industry. He's with her today. They're at the Superhuman Conference in Stockholm, Sweden. So that's, and then who do we have here? Thumbs up if you recognize the fellow in the white shirt. Of course, Josh recognizes this fellow. That's Brian Johnson, the Don't Die fellow. Brian Johnson with our very own Jose Cordero. Yeah, exactly. Yes. So Jose's out there really working the rounds for us. Incredible guy. Incredible man. And Jose will be at RADFest, and he'll be speaking with Cody, our very own Cody, in a group speech talk, a group talk there at RADFest. I'll be there, and we're going to hold a VIP party at RADFest. Immortalis will. I'll be there meeting with all of these incredible Mount Rushmore people like Brian Johnson and Liz Parrish and Bill Andrews. He signed an LOI, Sierra Sciences. He's a Mount Rushmore longevity biomedical biotech company, Sierra Sciences. All right, so things are just happening at warp speed here, as we'll call it. Here's a question from our beloved Tony Charles. Hello, Mr. Hamilton. Thank you so much. Let's see, let's hold this up here. Thank you. This way, okay. I'm just getting some directions here from Frankie. Thank you so much for making the world a better place. My question is, most of the people I am talking to about the Neothink philosophy have never read any of your books. So what should I do to persuade them of your noble ideas? Well, of course, Tony, they haven't read my books because they weren't invited. I did not personally invite them into my private club, the Neothink Society. But now, all of that is changing. I'd recommend, what we see Arlene and Alicia doing. Start talking about the prime law and now work in our pivot, the pivot about ending the suffering, and particularly among the senior class, the baby boomers, how this is going to end rapidly. Now that draws interest. I write out, in different coffee shops, and I hear conversations going on around me. And one heavily spoken conversation is about illness, particularly among the senior class. And so-and-so has cancer, so-and-so has heart disease, so-and-so has Alzheimer's, their poor family. Get in and talk about that. That Immortalis is going to end the suffering. That's a beautiful way to introduce Mark Hamilton to the layman. All right, I'm going to move on because we have a lot to cover here. Melvin said, how do you decide and know who has abilities to help manifest our goals? My answer, Melvin, is that actually everyone who hasn't crossed that line, when I say cross that line, I mean really be responsible for another human's death. Everyone who hasn't crossed that line is valuable, can be on our team. They just haven't been exposed to the wider, they're stuck in their specialized world. And if you feel someone is worth your time, let's say it's your daughter, and she's getting all caught up in all these political crazy, don't give up on her. Because somewhere inside of her is that innocent child of the past. If you see some of the people I have changed, you'd be a true believer in what I'm saying. Let's see. Well, I can't. I'll tell you why later. Peggy Sue. By the way, Peggy, I really appreciate your comments that you make on the comments that you make, particularly on the Mighty Network, the Join Immortalis site. I consider you almost like a rudder that guides things, guides the ship, steers the ship, because the way you come in, both from a intellectual basis and an emotional basis. It's a real skill, by the way, real skill. Peggy says, I would like to know your thoughts on creating my split-run clubhouse with the intention of creating space to learn about what it means to live in the essence of a man or a woman and what that looks like. Empowering people with the knowledge of the human design to create powerful, essence-driven relationships from the base level. Empowering each individual with the knowledge of their essence as they realize they too are a puzzle piece and discover their Friday night essence. Okay, very good question, Peggy Sue. Maybe you have run into what I've run into, a bit of controversy around the dual essences, for example, of women and the primary essence of man. And that doesn't mean they don't overlap. They absolutely do. It's a fluid situation. And men can get the deepest love and pleasure and happiness in life from emotional relationships with their spouse and their children and loved ones and friends. But when we go down to the biological nature, and that's how I try to break everything down over the past 45 years to our biological nature. That's how I know value creation is the essence of happiness for mankind. Value creation. A woman can approach that from dual essences, support, such as my wife, and being the nurturing person in our family, for our children, for me. That's a dual essence, and she can be part of my value creation. We're sharing it. You see, or a woman can be driven on as just as well as any man on any value creation. These things are fluid. We're operating in an anti-civilization where things are woke and you can be shamed for certain ways of thinking, but there are moral absolutes in this world, and there are biological absolutes in this world. So I'll leave it at that, Peggy Sue, but I know you understand what I'm saying and you are on the right track. And Frankie's standing right here. Frankie, be sure to interrupt me for anything that... Oh, interesting. Okay. Now, Pamela Chase. My husband and I are working hard on a clubhouse in Oregon. However, members are not all completing their profiles with their locations. Is there a possibility to get member information who are residing in Oregon so that they can be invited to their state sites and our clubhouses? I'm sure other state members would like that as well. Thank you. Okay, great question, Pamela. I am going to actually meet with my sons and with Josh on this, because I do think there's something there that can take place that's going to up the clubhouse attendance and draw us all closer together. So great question. I'm glad it came to me, and I know we're going to do something about that. Thank you, Pamela. All right. Let's see. Gene Simmons. Being a senior citizen and devoted member of the movement, I find myself very ignorant in the use of my computer. How can I get the knowledge I need and still keep my various endeavors in our society at a high level? I love what I do. Computers are a new ball game for me. Well, first of all, Gene, we all love what you do. You're such a contributor to our movement. We all love you very much. I love seeing you during these meetings. I love your questions. You know, after these meetings, I do go and watch all of these, what I miss. And you're very much an integral part of all of this. And I feel your pain when it comes to computers. I too often have to go to my sons to help me out. It's just the nature, right? The nature of things with my computer. I'd like, and again, I think I'll get with my sons and with Josh on this. I'm thinking I'm going to talk to Frankie about flow and his flow meetings, and about having you more involved, Gene. Does Gene attend your flow meetings? Okay, so we need to make you aware of that. That's exactly what Frankie does every week, Gene, is he helps people, particularly with their computer issues. So I want to get you on those, get you integrated with that, and we will get back to you, Gene. Make sure That issue is taken care of. You're too valuable, Gene. You're too valuable. Ranita, I would like to know more about the stem cell nutrition and when we can order it again. We had it for a few months, and then she went to reorder. She never got a reorder invitation, and there's a reason for that. So let me just clear that up right now. The stem cell is a very great product, and I took it myself. But we actually surpassed that with longevity, and I think all of you now have gotten your longevity fulfillment, and I have enough in stock right now. I think I sent a reorder form. We sent a reorder form for anyone who wants to reorder. But longevity is where we need to go. I call it the Michael Jordan molecule of longevity. It's a tough molecule to get because there are some issues with the government with that, and so people are afraid to provide that because they feel they're going to get a big inventory, and then the government's going to say you can't do that anymore because you're going to need this passed by the FDA and so on and so forth. I've taken a little bit more of a risk. I bought these fairly large inventory. I have some in stock now. It's tough getting that from the supplier, but we are now, and I have said this over and over again, we're not like your normal nutraceutical or a supplement company where we just try to bombard you with sales, sending you catalogs of all these different things to buy. I'm a firm believer at finding what is most effective at longevity and providing that to you. That costs me 4 times more than the stem cell supplement costs me. 4 times more. But I charge you the same price because you are my NeoThink family, and I want each of you to make it until Immortalis can cure age-related diseases and cure aging. Okay, let's move on. Aaron asks, what is the single most effective focal point that will ensure and guide us as a community of neo-thinkers and honest people of like minds to rapidly transform our local communities into prime law societies and our 12 Visions world now? Aaron, of course, you're in all of the meetings that we have, and so you're up to date with everything, with what Alicia's doing, what Arlene is doing. You're very up to date on all that. So I don't want to necessarily repeat all of that, but yes, prime law is very important, but please begin working in the pivot. That's the key. I mentioned when I was at Frankie's pre-wedding party, and I began to talk to just, people who I know and people who are strangers about Immortalis and what we're doing, and talking about the age-related diseases and the suffering that we find it in our responsibility to end the suffering. And people now general population now is completely seasoned to understand and accept that we're over-regulated. A lot has been exposed. You see this with Doge and with just the exposure of waste, fraud, and abuse. So people are primed now. They're very willing to work off the premise that we are over-regulated, and that's holding things back. And that's what we're doing now because we want this sudden surge in cancer. It's actually hitting young people now, these turbo cancers. And these Alzheimer's and dementia, it destroys families and breaks hearts. I'm telling you, as I said in my last talk, we have a hit just by the response. Again, I said it reminds me of when my daughter was in the entertainment business. You knew when you had a hit based on response, people's reactions. And I knew we have a hit. So work in the pivot into the prime law. Work in that pivot. Okay, next. It's a long question by Daniel Dost. Mr. Hamilton, I am truly amazed on a daily basis how your literature and your invitation into this beautiful world has summed up my whole life. I am a proud American vet and love my country dearly. My whole life, I have loved these United States of America and understand what a blessing and how fortunate we are to live here. But I have never found myself loving or trusting my government. As American exceptionalism has waned and her standing in the world has fallen to dramatic lows, my question to you, sir, is this. How much farther do we have to fall before it is actually too late? Can we rescue this beautiful country? Can the American people be as receptive to the 12 Visions world as all of us here in the Neothink Society have been? I truly hope so. Thank you, Mark. Love you, brother, Dan Dost. Okay, this is a great question. And first of all, again, with vets, this is not just a thank you for your service moment. And I think, Daniel, you've seen in my writings how much I appreciate those warriors who have protected our country and then allowed us to have our freedom to live the life that we are all living. It's just an honor that you have done that for myself and our country, and I love you dearly for that. Now, your dilemma of loving your country and not caring for or not liking your ruling class, your government. Well, we're soulmates. I share that deeply, that same emotional response. I love this country, and I've studied its past. And when you study the past, nowadays, particularly the wokeism just attacks our past. We are the most beautiful, benevolent society that's ever graced the earth when you go through our past. And you see what we've done with codifying classical liberalism and freedom. And the freedom we had for the first 150 years is nothing like the world has ever seen before. And I love that about us, about America. And Americans sort of around the world are known for being sheltered, not knowing the world. Having done a fair amount of traveling, I see that and I understand what that is. But people around the world love America. They love America. It would be their greatest dream to live in America. So yes, you can hate. Yes, you could hate that which is bringing down America. And it's what I call the world's largest cult, the ruling class, suppressing us, keeping us trapped in what? In subtle mysticism, suppressing us in the following mode. Be that the government, particularly all branches of government. Some are raising their ugly head more than others. So you have that in government, you have that in the influential class in the media. And there's reasons for that. I've written about my books, how the quick and easy way up to the top of legacy media is by pushing down value creators and stepping on them and using them to get your glory and power and rise up. So they're a real wicked bunch. And my father used to say, do not give any media the time of day. With Neothink, though, I actually evolved beyond that. I actually welcome media, and this is going to serve me well at this point, because I found with Neothink I could out-integrate them, which I've always done now in meeting, say, a belligerent media outlet. I've been able to actually, in some cases, turn the reporter around himself, which is quite interesting, quite rewarding. So, yes, you cannot like the influential class, a wicked bunch of people, the ruling class, a cult, and the white-collar hoax, which suppresses us and keeps us down with that subtle mysticism, trapping us in the following mode. You cannot like all of that. We offer the way out. Yes, we do. So keep your head up, Daniel. Keep your head up. This is what we're doing. I'm all in, as I said. This is my end game. And this is what can change us from an anti-civilization. into the sea of you on earth. Let's see what else we've got here. That's Daniel. Now, let's see. Rose, have you submitted the proposal to the elites? And will you let us, know when that has transpired? Also, will you inform us if you receive a response? And will you tell us that you choose us because we are, and you tell us you choose us because we are searchers. But do not tell us the process which you use to find us searchers. Can you do that now? Okay, we got two questions going on here. The first question, I gave a little overview of what's happening, the elites, whom I've been in touch with President Milei, with the upper levels of the European nation, and soon with the upper levels of the Trump administration. I am going to keep you as informed as I can as things happen through my daily primes, and they show up both on the Ascenders, the Ascension, and also I put those that are involving Immortalis on the joinimmortalis.com website quite daily, usually a daily affair. So yes, I will keep you informed. Now, on the other question, the way I found all of you, it's such a complex system. Another accolade that will come out is I've run the largest and longest running direct response program in the history of our country. And I would probably say with a little more research of the world. This is such an evolved system that I worked, I mean, I used to call it The Matrix, even before there was a movie called The Matrix. And it was so involved, so massive, to find searches with such overlapping data, that it was both done manually and through the computers. Some of you have asked who requested you. And I can tell you in many cases who requested you was on my team through the extensive work we do. And I have many people on this would come to me and say, Mark, I think we should invite Rose into our society. And here's the reasons. Here's the report that shows me why. So imagine the size of what I was doing, how that consumed us was my search for searchers for you, Rose. There's no way I could show you the complexity of that system. And it's largely proprietary. I don't want that to get into the wrong hands. I don't want certain dogmatic religious groups, for example, getting a hold of that matrix. I don't want certain political movements getting a hold of that matrix. So it's highly confidential. No one except for those in my highest inner circle understand how it works. But it's the most magnificent. That's why I'm the last man standing in this whole dynamic, and the longest and the largest. All right, let's move on. Hope that answered, Rose, your question. Let's open my eyes. Cynthia says, Neothink has opened my eyes to how naive I really was in terms of the overall scope of how this world system works. Now I'm struggling on my religious, spiritual foundation and how to integrate my belief system with what I learned from Neothink without fragmenting my psyche. Is it possible to move past a belief system? I'm struggling. First of all, Cynthia, it'd be good to know that you're not alone. Many, many people out of my 2 million have struggled with this. Now, Neotech simply points out the fundamental realities. That's what Neotech did. Neothink goes into living your life with the Neothink mentality. And there's nuances, and there's different beliefs. And I have never, in Neothink now, come out and say this needs to be contradictory to being in Neothink. I accept any and everyone into Neothink because I'm helping them evolve from the following mode into the Neothink mentality. And any belief system you bring into the Neothink society is completely okay. And I don't have a problem. And I will say this, whereas I do have a problem with a lot of organized religions because I see it with my own eyes, a lot of the fraud that they're controlling innocent people for their own power and glory at the higher levels. Just like in any ruling class, ruler, follower, controller, follower dynamic. Still, I see, and I've written about this, a lot of value in the Bible. I see a lot of value in people who are religious because they're seeking virtues. You see, searchers are largely drawn toward the value aspects in religion, the virtues in religions, the work hard and effort and the love and the help for your fellow man. All of that is in Neothink. All of that is in religion. Now, Neotech goes and it shows hardcore the evil of certain religions where they are taking advantage of followers, organized religions. Neothink doesn't do that. Neothink understands values that can be in the Bible, in religions, in spiritual dynamics. And you're completely welcome in here. And all my objective is to have you live a happier life, whatever it takes to get there, through integrating more widely. A lot of times as you integrate more widely on your own, not being pushed or pressured by me, on your own, you begin to see certain problems in certain belief systems you may hold. But it's not so difficult at that point in time because you're able to see the wider picture. And that's always been a lifesaver to me. When I see the wider picture, I can function much better on dealing with a personal mysticism. Great. So just think about that. Think about that a little more deeply, Cynthia, and remove the fear. Remove the fear. Michael Chase. When I'm out in public, I like to share a bookmark that has the prime law on it. I use that too, Michael. I love that bookmark. Do you approve? And since Neothink is going public, how do you feel about sending an interested person to a social media outlet? Michael, I'm taking down all boundaries at this point. You know, I've been very, very protective in the past. And those of you who understand what we've gone through in our past in dealing with the ruling class, you'll understand why I kept this just to ourselves. And as I said, I kept a low profile. There were articles, for example, saying the most powerful men in Las Vegas, and I would chuckle over that because I knew it was my father and myself, how we were changing the world. But we keep such a low profile that no one knew who we were. And we had to keep a low profile because the ruling class was too threatened by what we were uncovering and presenting to people. So I had the world's largest direct response program. I brought in the searchers of the world, all under the radar. But I cannot live under the radar anymore. And please, when you see my accolades out there, realize it's because now I have to sit on my power. I have to sit on my power as I interact with people in the public world. It's not who I naturally am. I'm not naturally a person who likes to brag. I'm not a person who, I'm a very private person. I've kept my family private, out of the public eye. That's not my natural state. But look, I've said before, I'm not a writer to be a writer. I was a writer to serve my objective, my goal. And my goal was to bring the Neothink mentality to the people so I could lift them out of that stagnant life into the happy life as a value creator, so I could increase the demand for curing aging and death. And then I knew I would have to move in, and that's where I've written my political books. And now I'm going to be acting on that. I have to move into allowing the supply to rise to the demand. The demand is higher than it's ever been. And I am a large piece to that puzzle. And our good friend Jose Cordero and Liz Parrish, Bill Andrews, Brian Johnson, those people, the Mount Rushmore of longevity, they're all responsible for now having the demand higher than it's ever been. Jose predicts that the longevity industry is going to be the largest industry in the world in a few years. And guess who is waiting there to open our doors and bring all that in? It's Immortalis. You see, so now I have to sing from the rooftops my accolades. I have to let the world know my credentials. That's how, the Tim Ferrisses of the world, the Joe Rogans will call me and say, hey, you're an interesting guy. You have a lot of credentials. Can you come on my podcast? You see, because that's where I have to go now. So please, just realize, Mark Hamilton, this is not going to his head. It never will. Because my goal, since I was a young man, is mankind's greatest responsibility, which is to not allow itself to perish. That's our greatest responsibility. Elon Musk worries about the declining birth rate. He says that's what keeps him up at night, that the human race will go extinct, like the Neanderthal man went extinct. And he's truly worried about that. I did a little response on X to him basically saying, let me introduce you to Immortalis. Because we take care of that problem, but on the other end of the spectrum, on longevity. So the human race will not go extinct. It's only natural, and he sees no way to reverse it. It's only natural that birth rates will drop with increased science. He sees no way out of that. I do. And I'm enlightening him to that. And the way out of it is Immortalis. And eventually, immortality. Some of you may not feel that right now. And it may seem, and Michael, when you're out there talking to people, you don't have to talk about immortality. Because that's too big for a lot of people. That even today, that's too big for a lot of people. Just talk about ending the suffering, living longer with our loved ones, not having our families have to go through the anxiety as we go through an age-related disease. So that's where you can keep your conversations, Michael. It'll serve you well. Larry Johnson. Immortalis is being built on prime law of pure freedom. When gathering all resources need, how do we maneuver around the dirty world of politics that constantly destroys life? Okay, great question, Larry. Great question. I don't fear that, Larry, at all any longer. Here's why. Because going back to our very initial roots. In fact, Frankie the other day was reading the Prime Discovery. And I was saying, Frankie, you don't have to read through the entire poker manual. You just sort of need to know the basic concept in there and understand that. But he said, no, that's our roots. I need to read every word of this. So going back to that we are playing a poker game, a very high-stakes poker game. I feel I know how the game is played now. we are going to run into anti-civilization dynamics. But Larry, again, I see us putting through the first bipartisan bill in a long, long time. And why? Because I know how to play the game. We're not going to talk about the evils of the ruling class. We're not going to talk about the prime law at this point in time. Actually, I do have that in the act. And Cody Dean gets a lot of credit for this act because he developed the initial draft of this act, and it took a lot of work. And boy, he's a real neo-thinker, that guy. We do have the prime law in the act, but it's put in there in a sort of a harmless way. Like, this is how we're going to run our business. This is how we're going to be transparent. This is how we're going to have simplicity. We're going to stop the complexity from taking over. So it's in there very innocently. And I'm going to be doing quite a bit more editing on our legislative act. I've done a little bit to this point, but I'll be digging into it as I did with the executive order and the executive summary. And by the way, we have an incredible sizzle reel we're putting together for Donald Trump because we know that's what he likes. And this sizzle reel sells itself. By the time you're done with the sizzle reel, you'll say, let me sign the executive order. I'm sold. This is what we're doing with the sizzle reel. Then we have a pitch deck. He loves graphs and charts. So this Wallace is largely in charge of the pitch deck. It's coming together wonderfully. He did an incredible pitch deck talk in Roatan, which they never put up in the public, but he's quite skilled at that. And by the way, Wallace, I mentioned earlier, he's on his way to Xcaret in Mexico. He's there for a week-long conference. We're going to report on that after that, but a lot of major headway could happen from this conference. He'll be meeting with some business heavyweights that we could potentially partner with, people like Russell Brunson. The other list of names, just because I'm trying to keep focus on this question, but it should be a very, very powerful 7 days. So anyway, getting back on Larry here. So I'm not worried anymore, Larry, about the anti-civilization. I know how to get the people to love us. That's going to happen, and then we're going to have power, and we'll take it in increments. We won't go all at once. Possibly in Eastern Europe, I'll go all at once. You know what I mean by that. Go straight for that autonomous zone. But I will say, even mentioning the word autonomous in this location in Europe that really, really needs us. This is why I have such leverage there. Even the word autonomous scares them, freaks them out. So I go about it, have to play the game, but that's what ultimately I'm after in that location. I don't think we're going to get that anywhere else initially. I'll get a hybrid, as I mentioned before, in Argentina, and I'll start at the opposite side of the spectrum here in America. But the anti-civilization is going to not be the problem that we've experienced in the past. I'll leave it at that, simply because, Larry, of my secret ingredient, my secret weapon, the people. Michael Chase, I have a question regarding some of the already declared prime law territories. Would Seven Pines and others be requested to be included in the proposal for the United States Special Autonomous Zone? First of all, I want to just extend my appreciation so much to Michael and Pamela, how they offer up Seven Pines. I mean, that's very admirable, and I really do appreciate that. And I know I haven't mentioned that before, and largely because I was trying to keep that in the equation to see if that was a possibility. I actually own quite a bit of land too in Nevada, and I was looking at my land and Michael and Pam's land, and I know others have mentioned land that they are offering. I'm very flattered and deeply appreciate that, and I see your loyalty and your understanding what this means for us and for our future generations. So I want to just express that first before I say anything else. Now, I have come to realize that we cannot initially look at private land. Not in America. I can in other countries, and I am doing that. The fellow I work with, who is the leader in the zone space field, has informed me that America is the only country where it's quite unique that if you get private land, you're subjected, obviously subjected to all the local authorities and all of the state authorities. And this is why I'm going for federal land. With federal land, you can bypass the state and local authorities. I mean, I even looked at some land in California, for example. But the reason I could never do private land in California is because the regulations are through the roof, and not to mention the taxation. That's why companies move out of California, move to Texas or Florida. But private land is going to be too difficult for us to work with at this point in time. Now, in this Eastern European country, I'm looking at both public-private relationships as well as private land. Because in foreign countries, America is unique in this aspect that we have the local and state authorities that we have to answer to. Basically, when you get a special economic zone in foreign countries, you're only subjected to the federal government, not to all the different layers of government. So you just bypass. It's almost like getting federal land here in America. They go to that extent. So, Michael, I hope that answers your question. But my goodness, what a warm offer that you have made. Thank you. Thank you, you and Pamela. Let's see. I believe that's it from the selection that I pulled out. We've been going at this for about an hour and a half. I do have to film all afternoon, but I want to open this up. Josh, let's give this maybe about 40 minutes. And if you can keep track of the time, Josh. I really am on a fairly hard break at 2:30 my time. So let's open it up, Josh. You go ahead and just open the mic or however you do it to each person that you select to talk to me. I'm just going to leave the selection process up to you. Josh, since you work with all of these are your NeoThink.io folks, and you work with them on a regular basis, so let's do it.
All right. Well, we got 4 really good questions in the Q&A. Can you hear us okay, Mark?
I can, and I will be looking down a bit on this because I'm looking at the questioner and so on and so forth. But then, I'll try to look up. What's that?
Okay,
The
so-
Popeye. Okay, right here. Okay.
I'm gonna allow Edwin to mention his because I think he can expand on it. So Edwin, you had submitted what will be the funding sources for the special economic zones, and maybe you can just elaborate a little bit for Mark on that. Go ahead, Edwin. You're unmuted.
Thank you, Mark, for all you've shared so far. It's been really awesome. I don't know if I have a lot more to expand on that, but I would like to know what your vision is for funding sources, if there's any private corporations, government entities, or funding campaigns, or anything else.
Okay. Edwin, can you, what Josh said to me, I think, Josh, I'd rather that person actually ask the question from scratch because I can match it more to their personality. So, Edwin, can you just go ahead and start from scratch here and ask the question?
Okay, what will be all the funding sources for the special economic zones?
Funding sources. All right. We are going to take a unique approach. Most special economic zones will start with major investors. I do believe people like Peter Thiel, Mark Andreessen, Balaji. I do believe people like that. In fact, there's a Pronamos VC fund, and I've been in contact with Patri Friedman. He's Milton Friedman's grandson, and he will work with me on that. But I've actually been moving in a different direction now. As I see the reaction of these biotech companies that want to move to Immortalis, I probably, and I've been leaning and been discussing this with the team, leaning toward having them do their build outs. And basically, they will finance the building of Immortalis. So we are not going to have problems financing this and where the funding is going to come from. And then I do believe once that happens, FOMO is going to kick in. And are you familiar with FOMO?
Yes.
Why don't you say it so everyone here knows what that means?
Fear of missing out.
Absolutely. And that's when, instead of approaching the Peter Thiels of the world first, I'll let them come to me. And that's, so I'm not worried one bit about the funding. I am spending a lot of my own money at these early phases of this. But once we start to build out, I do believe the funding will come pouring in. So
Fantastic.
no worries there. Good. Nice seeing you, Edwin.
Yeah.
Okay. Keep up the good work on your social media.
Yeah. Thank you.
You got it. All right, Josh, let's move on.
All right, Andrea, if you can unmute, go ahead.
My first question was, what do you think of the transhumanism movement?
I mean, that's fantastic. We have one of the leaders in that field with our good friend Jose Luis Cordero with the Death of Death. They're all on board. They're all part of what we're doing. We have some who have very different views than the prime law. A fellow I talked to in France, Didier, we almost had a burning of the bridge through emails, and I said, okay, whoa, let's get on the phone. None of us are going to burn any bridges. We're all trying to do the same thing here. Get on the phone, and then I was able to turn that situation. So he's a huge ally, even though he is a huge government guy, government grants, and so on, and I'm not that type of person. But no, I want everyone and anyone who benefits us in this movement.
I personally have concerns about it, but
I'll keep things under control.
I believe in making place for different viewpoints and whatnot.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Andrea.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrea.
All right, John G., go ahead and unmute.
Nice to finally speak to you, Mr. Hamilton.
Likewise.
I've been rapping for so long to the Neil family.
Oh yeah, you're our musician. I recognize you right off the bat. Wow. I love your music.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to hearing more music, not just rap music. So
Definitely.
musicians out there, I'm listening.
Definitely.
On the Sunday Arts call that I host on Sundays, I always bring up, I keep everybody updated with what's going on. Hey, look at what I found on X. There's a lot of talk about human trafficking. There's a lot of talk about financial reset kind of things. Is this going to be all integrated towards stepping into Immortalis?
Oh, absolutely. And by the way, it's interesting you mentioned X. I'm probably going to get a little bit more involved now with X, but here's the funny thing. If you look at my texts with my brother, Eric Savage, that's what should be going on X. But I am not putting that on X, even though it would get a huge following, because I'm protecting Immortalis. So what I'm saying to you is, if I voiced my deeper insights on X, it would sabotage the movement on Immortalis. So I'm always being aware of that, being careful. People we attract in the longevity field are, some of them, politically speaking, are extremely liberal. And some of the people we attract are extremely conservative. So whereas my writings expose everything with Immortalis in our public face, I have to touch on what appeals to the right and touch on what appeals to the left. So we have to keep all of that in mind as we work our magic on X and other social media events. And did that answer your question?
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I'm going to just keep, whoever comes on the call, updated with world events, current event kind of thing, and I try to filter it through Neil thing and just hang out with the family in that manner and keep moving forward.
And I'll tell you, you know, John, music is an amazing thing because you can get such a powerful message through music and it doesn't offend the way it would if it's spoken. So, because you're dealing with the right brain and they just sort of absorb it, that's what I had in mind when I wrote Super Puzzle. I can get powerful messaging across, hitting them from the emotional right brain and not through the intellectual left brain. So we really need you. We really need you, John.
I thought you were talking about me when you brought up Reggie Tucker.
Oh, no, no, no.
Sorry, I was like, oh, you talking about rap music? Out of all music, you brought up rap music, and I'm like, oh my god, I was talking about it.
And that's incredible. Yeah, rap music, it bypasses that left brain, but you get the message out there, So it's very valuable. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, sir.
You got it. Nice talking to you.
All right, thank you, John. We're going to Arlene next.
Good afternoon, Mark.
Hey, my artist. Hi, Arlene.
Hi. I have going to be given a very unique situation here in several weeks. I checked in with one of my neighbors who I've been talking to about what we are doing here with Immortalis and Ascension and Neothink and the Prime Law and all of the things that we are working on. And when I talked with him on night before last, he let me know that he is forming a new men's group here in Oklahoma City and has said that he would love for me to come and discuss everything that we do with these men. And from what I gather, he is taking a lot of men who have kind of fallen by the wayside and who are a bit lost, and he's trying to give them a new life and a new direction. And my question is, where do I start? Because we have so much that we can give, and I probably will only have about 10 or 15 minutes to talk.
Wow, yeah, that's a tall order, Arlene. It really is. And before I give a talk, I like to understand my audience. So do you feel you understand your audience?
I think I understand where he is coming from.
Okay.
And I will have to talk to him a bit more about the guys that he is putting together with this group, because they were going to be meeting today for the first time, so he was going to learn more about them. And then he said after they've met a few times and they've gotten to know each other better, then he said that he will let me know when I can come and talk with them. But I get the feeling that these people, these young men or older men or whoever they are like us. They're searchers. They're looking for a different form of life because they are tired of what they've been having to deal with in society. So for me, this is my bigger step, because most of the time I talk to like on one-on-one or 2 or 3 people, but to a group, this would be a whole new ballgame.
Yeah, and that was actually my next question, if you knew the demographics. So you feel they're going to be slightly older?
I think so. They're not going to be older.
Right.
They're going to be, say, in their mid-40s to 50s, because that's about the age group that this event is.
I mean, if I were walking into that situation without knowing anything more than what you just told me, I would focus on productivity, because that's something very important to a man, is productivity. So I would come in and I would give a little almost business talk on you belong to a society that has breakthrough techniques on becoming a much more productive person. It doesn't matter what job you may be in or what job you may not be in, or where you land in the social structure. This is just full of wonderful techniques for becoming a more productive individual. And then perhaps if you're just a 10 to 15 minute talk, you can perhaps just roll into, that there's a schedule that I've been taught that's just been so effective for me, called the mini-day schedule, and it's allowed me to gather the time to where I can get visions and think more broadly about my life. And then what will happen, Arlene, is you'll deliver a very incomplete speech. So be aware of that. It'll be incomplete. But when it's over, if there's 50 individuals there, you're going to have about 41 of them lining up to talk to you. And that's where you can get more into Neothink and what this could do for you, and possibly bring some of them in, bring them into Join Immortalis, or bring them into wanting to know more about the Neothink Society. So go in for an incomplete talk about productivity, knowing that's what you're doing, and then say, I'll be at the back after this is over. Anyone like to talk to me further? And let me know what kind of crowd you generate.
Okay, I will do so. I actually did introduce the mini day system to the two ladies in my new mastermind counseling class that I'm involved in.
Nice.
And they are very, very interested in it. And we're going to be talking all of our system outside of those masterminds.
Nice.
So I will continue on with the men the way I'm doing with the women. So
You're a real warrior. Arlene, you are one of our top warriors. Always have been. Thank you, Arlene. I really appreciate you.
Well done, Arlene. Okay, Malinek, you're up next.
Hey, Mark, glad to be with you today.
Hello, Malinek.
Yes, my question
I don't
is,
see him, Frankie. Oh, there he is. Okay, gotcha.
Okay. Yeah, my question is, what made you feel that the initial goal was to have Immortalis in 10 years? So you mentioned the other week it may happen 3 to 4 year period. So what were some of the primary great gifts that happened and blessings to maybe bring it back and at a sooner time? And what strategies were involved to make that happen?
Great question. Great question. All right. So my initial approach was the network state. And I wanted to see what strength we could build through a network state. Network state, Josh, you want to just give a 60-second explanation of the network state, then I'll go from there.
Sure, yeah, it's just you start as an online community that's highly aligned, and then you start to make that online community capable of collective action, and then it should start to manifest in the real world through meetups in different local areas, and still connected globally, digitally toward a common goal. So not necessarily just one location, and then eventually the population, the economic activity, the real estate footprint can get so large that people just have to deal with you. They have to negotiate with you. Okay, back to you, Mark.
Okay, great. Great little explanation there. And that was going to be the major approach. But what happened was when we got out there in the real world, because remember, I've been fairly removed from society as the Neothink Secret Society. As I started getting out there, starting some social media, Cody got involved, got James Stroll, who's the co-founder of Radfest, on his Immortalis show. And then from that, I saw some pictures of Jose Cadero holding up this book called The Death of Death. So I said, Wallace, I need to get that book. Next thing I know is I saw Jose with his arm around Milei, and I'm saying, well, look at this. Because Milei, is a powerful classical liberalism, libertarian president, powerful charismatic figure of Argentina. And I said, well, we've got to get a hold of this Jose to see if we can, possibly get an introduction to President Milei. And it turns out that James Stroll is a friend of Jose Cadero. So Cody got Jose onto his show. Then after the show, I talked to Jose for the first time. And then I went down to Mont Pelerin, where I was going to meet with Javier Milei, but he had some issues in Argentina, couldn't make the trip. But thank goodness I went there and got very close and started networking. Next thing you know, I'm talking to, Mount Rushmore type people in this whole longevity field. It's like they're starving for what we have to offer. And what we have to offer is different than what any of they have. What they have is the actual scientific, clinical trials in progress. What we have is the ability to create a zone where they can do what they want to do. So it just became this natural marriage between myself and all of these scientists working out there, and one thing led to another, and then I said, well, I'm going to start tapping on some of my assets. My friend who's high up there in the Trump administration was one, and then the person we met down in Mount Pelerin goes back to Eastern Europe. Now we're all involved with their government, and then, of course, Jose has been corresponding with Malay. So all of this just started happening at warp speed, Malinek, and I'm not one to sit back and not move when opportunity offers itself. So I just went full out. Happened much quicker than I realized. But the reason behind all that, and this is what Cody expressed early on, is we have the whole foundation. So we are the ones able to do this. Someone who I'm going to be meeting with soon, a fellow named Lawrence Eon, is doing a similar thing. But what he wants is a zone that he can do his thing in, you see. That's what we bring to the table. He wants us to provide. In fact, he's offered something like $1 million or $2 million to whoever can unlock a zone that he can operate in. That's probably going to be us. Maybe I'll be able to recover some of my money that I'm spending on this. But that's not why I'm doing this. But I'll be meeting with Lawrence very soon. I know we're going to be soulmates. It's just when I got out there in the world and they realized our foundation, we're coming off over a half a century of developing the integrations behind all of this, the literature. I mean, it'd be like if Ayn Rand went out and wanted to start Gulch herself. She'd have a tremendous following. That's who we are. We have a tremendous following. We have the largest in any, as far as numbers go. I see these freedom cities out there doing their thing, and they have 1 or 2 views on TikTok. I have 20 million views now on TikTok, and I'm not even trying. We're just getting in there and figuring it out. So I'm saying I have the following, I have the roots, I have everything back to Aristotle himself, to Murray Rothbard, to classical liberalism. We're not just opportunists taking advantage of the longevity industry. We're the real deal. This is where Immortalis, this is where the entire longevity industry is going. They realize that once they meet us. They need us, and they're pieces to the puzzle for us. They're puzzle pieces, and we're going to put together that super puzzle, of course, that I wrote about. So I hope that answers your question, Malinek.
Yes, and I feel is Europe the great seeding ground for that to happen first?
Absolutely. That's Immortalis. It's the seeding ground. I'm telling you I'm going to let you know, since you are pushing the question, what I'm doing next week. It goes back to an experience I had and I wrote in my daily about. It's going to be my little technique. Back in the days, you remember my daily I wrote about when I changed the International Surface Airlift Program among all the countries through one letter that I wrote. But I had FedEx deliver it right during all the United countries in their postal meeting. I timed it so FedEx walked in and handed each person in that country, the head of each country, my letter. They opened it during their meeting, read my letter, and they said, this changes everything. Yeah. So I'm using that technique now with biomedical companies. I'm going to launch this next week. I'm going to hit the 90 most reputable biotech companies in America, FedEx it to their CEO, and what that usually means is their number 2 man will get it, right? That's what that means. The number 2 man is the greatest kept secret because the number 2 man has enormous power, and he will take the time to read the letter. So starting the week after next, I believe we're going to see an incredible following start happening behind Immortalis. We're going to hit the radar. So just letting you know, be prepared for our next meeting. We'll talk about this.
Yeah, thank you, Mark.
Oh, you're welcome. So nice talking to you.
You too.
Yeah, thank you, Malinak. I don't see any more hands up, so
Wonderful.
We're getting through the questions. We might be able to let you get back to your day. Not sure how we're doing on the 40 minutes. Do you have a follow-up thought or a question that you want to mention, Mark?
You know, I could have pulled a few more out. And I'm sorry for everyone's question that I missed. I selected ones that had to be talked about today. We can get to those in a future date. I also left the questions that I felt might have been brought up today, which some of them were. So I'm just trying to hit a wide swath the best I can. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up. As I said, Wallace is in Mexico. How far is Escaleret from where you are, Josh?
Well, if it's Xcaret, the hotel resort.
It is,
place,
yes.
That's in the Riviera de Maya, so that's pretty far from where I am personally, but it's
Okay.
not that far from where Gabriel is, and Gabriel has it's 111 acres, 45 hectare property.
Right.
In Yucatan, which is maybe like an hour and a half from Xcaret, so it might be good to get Wallace and Gabriel to rendezvous while they're in the same area.
I'll mention that to Wallace. Fantastic. Great. Yeah, that's it for today, guys. Again, I love these meetings. I guess you won't be having anything after I get off, so I won't be following up with anything today. But wonderful. Love seeing all of you. Things are moving very quickly. And I'll see you. Gosh, it'll be the next time I'll see you will be the All Citizens meeting. So what's that, Josh? In 3 weeks?
Is it the third or fourth Sunday of the month?
I believe it's the fourth Sunday. So
Okay.
yeah, good.
Very
Great.
excellent. Yeah, we got some All Citizens meeting vibes in this one too.
We sure did.
Everywhere you go, just updates.
Yeah, I'll also be, a lot of you are good friends or know about Kevin Trudeau. I'll be having lunch with him Monday, so that will be interesting. We'll see what we uncover, see if there's anything we might want to do together with this Immortalis. We'll talk about all of it. Our lunch will probably turn into about a 4-hour affair, so. Great, guys. Go ahead, Josh.
I was going to say only good things can come from you and Kevin meeting for 4 hours over lunch.
Right. Good deal. All right, guys, I'm going to go. We have a lot of filming to do this afternoon, but again, it's wonderful seeing everyone. Bye for now. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Mute you guys if you want to say adios to Mark here.
See you later. Thank you so much, Mark.
You got it.
Thank you.
You got it. Wonderful. All right. Frankie, jump in here real quick. Come on, Frankie. Frankie's going to say goodbye.
Everyone, great meeting.
Oh, hey, guys, before you go, real quick, Larry, I just got your coloring book. I love it. Just wanted to mention that. I just saw it yesterday. Here it is. Really, really great book. Wow. This is one for the child of the past. Beautiful, beautiful job. Fantastic. So we'll get, this is on Amazon, everyone. Get it for your grandchildren or your children, please.
I got a copy of it.
Oh, great, Arlene.
Down in Texas when we had our big conference down there.
Oh, right. Good. So I just opened that yesterday. Larry saw it for the first time. I love it. Great job.
Nice, yeah.
All right, everyone. I gotta go, but wonderful. It's been great. Bye-bye. 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 I'm out. Okay.